Hello and welcome to another week's analysis behind the news. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to focus entirely on one event that occurred about a week and a half ago. If you've been following the battle over whether or not to hold a constitutional convention, you've probably heard about it. The Convention of States held a mock Article 5 convention to demonstrate how well it would work. A complete success, they claim. What would you expect otherwise when there were no one but their friends involved in it? 137 of them, they state. By invitation only, of course. But what would happen if a true convention was called? This simulated convention had no real power, thus there was no real temptation to abuse power, thus there was no real chance of it devolving into a runaway convention. So their claims that the simulated convention is exactly how the real convention would be ring hollow. A true convention would not have only 4 Democrats in attendance. Nor did the convention have a single progressive delegate from the most liberal states. Should we be so naive to believe that only constitutional conservatives would be delegates? Should we also be so naive to believe that there would be no special interest influence from either the right or the left? In 2014, we documented that the right was being used to help facilitate the goal of those on the left to call for a convention to make far-reaching changes to the Constitution. Do you really think the likes of George Soros, the Clinton Foundation, or even the Koch brothers would steer clear of a convention to propose amendments at best and rewrite the Constitution at worst? Think of what they would do if they had a free hand in shaping amendments. Yet in a radio interview, COS leader Mark Meckler essentially said that the states would serve as their own check against bad amendments. Really? So would he agree that the states did a bang-up job in 1913 when they ratified the 16th Amendment, which established the income tax? Not to mention the 17th Amendment, which took away a key check and balance of the states? These 2 amendments have paved the road on which we now find our current out-of-control federal government. And in 1919, the 18th Amendment establishing prohibition was also ratified by the states. The convention also followed the rules the COS had set up last year. According to their own document on the rules, they issued a shortcut in order to save time, but insist that this won't happen in a real convention. They also claim that the rules won't be broken in a real convention, yet in the 1787 convention, rules were definitely broken. The Articles of Confederation were rewritten, and a new set of ratification rules were set into place. As we wrote in 2014 in an article titled, "Working Together to Rewrite the Constitution," well-meaning conservatives who advocate for a constitutional convention fail to recognize that once Congress convenes a convention, it cannot be undone, and no predetermined rules or limitations adopted by either Congress or the states will have any bearing on what the convention delegates may choose to do or propose. As the representatives of the sovereign will of the people at large in each state, convention delegates would have free latitude to propose any changes they see fit, including the writing of an entirely new constitution, along with changes to the mode of ratification so as to guarantee the adoption of their amendments. This scenario is known as a runaway convention, and it is not without historical precedence. The Continental Congress originally tasked the delegates assembled at the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention of 1787 with the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. At the time, the Articles of Confederation was the law of the land. Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation specifically stipulated that any alterations made to them must be unanimously confirmed by the legislatures of every state. Both of these mandates were clearly exceeded. The delegates chose to replace the articles with an entirely new federal constitution. Yet, Mr. Meckler also brought up in the same interview that new research has proven that the delegates did have the authority from the states to do this. Apparently, this new research did include input from Edmund Randolph, the governor of Virginia, who addressed the convention on May 29th and proposed a new form of government instead of revising the Articles of Confederation. A couple of weeks later, Governor Randolph argued persuasively that the times that they found themselves in called for those assembled to step outside their state's mandates. He said, "There are great seasons when persons with limited powers are justified in exceeding them, and a person would be contemptible not to risk it." Moreover, James Madison wrote in his notes about New York delegate Alexander Hamilton. He agreed, moreover, with the honorable gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Randolph, that we owed it to our country to do on this emergency whatever we should deem essential to its happiness. The states sent us here to provide for the exigencies of the Union. To rely on and propose any plan not adequate to these exigencies merely because it was not clearly within our powers would be to sacrifice the means to the end. Folks, perhaps in another 200 years, new research will show that these men never existed. So now let's take a look at what this friendly band at the COS Mock Convention proposed as far as amendments. First of all is the statement written and agreed upon by those in the convention, and it reads, "The convention respectfully submits these proposals to the American people with the conviction that they are a sound beginning to a critically needed national discussion about restoring the balance of power between the federal government and the states. Further, it is a conviction of this body that the states must deliberate and adopt appropriate proposals for a balanced budget amendment and an amendment to provide the states a means to serve as a check on judicial overreach by the federal judiciary of the United States." If this is what we can expect from these statesmen, then we may as well stop right here, because any credibility they may have had just went out the window. They are saying that the Constitution provides no means for a balanced budget nor a check on federal judicial overreach. However, the bloated federal budget that we now have contains many unconstitutional agencies and entrenched bureaucracy. We, in the John Birch Society, would estimate that about 80% of the federal government and budget is unconstitutional. A balanced budget amendment will do nothing to get rid of this. Rather, it deals only with balancing federal income and outlays. Whether or not the outlays are unconstitutional makes no difference to them. Yet, if the federal government shed these unconstitutional agencies and bureaucracies, then the level of spending would be well within what the government takes in. Regarding judicial overreach, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution already provides for it. Congress can limit the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. If Congress will not follow the Constitution now, why in the world would it follow a new amendment? And we don't know what else would be thrown into that amendment either. Predictably, the proposed amendments ignore the heart of the matter, but merely provide thinly veiled window dressing. The first proposed amendment deals with fiscal restraint, specifically how nothing will be added to the debt without 2/3 approval from the House and Senate. Well, isn't this who got us into the trouble in the first place? And how eager are they to tackle the budget? The Constitution, prior to the 17th Amendment, had a much more solid check and balance of this power. State legislators appointed those in the U.S. Senate. When the House of Representatives would propose a budget or a bill of revenue, the Senate would obviously need to vote on it to pass it or to kill it. The states these senators were representing were on the hook for any revenue needed to fund these bills, and a bill would be sent to each state of which the state legislature would need to pay. So, due to the system of state-appointed senators, citizens unhappy with the taxes being raised to pay this bill had a large say in the fiscal responsibility of the federal government. The advent of the 16th and 17th Amendments, as well as the Federal Reserve Act, killed this direct check and balance. So why not repeal those amendments instead of adding more? The second proposed amendment deals with narrowing the scope of the Commerce Clause of Article 1, Section 8. Their argument is that the Constitution gives too much authority to Congress regarding trade among the states. Again, this tweaking will do very little about unconstitutional agencies and their regulations. Focusing on obeying the Constitution we already have should be the solution, not rewriting it. The next focuses on term limits, which sound good, yet have term limits helped to make the office of the presidency any better? The American electorate has the ability to term limit any politician during every election. Why put limits on the electorate by making it impossible to re-elect good politicians after some arbitrary number of terms? Two others deal with federal and judicial jurisdiction, again, both of which are already in the Constitution. And a final proposed amendment deals with fiscal constraint regarding taxes. A simpler way is to repeal the 16th Amendment. Folks, it's one thing to play Constitution, and it's another thing to actually use and restore the limitations on government already built into the U.S. Constitution. We'll reiterate what we said last week. There are good people in the Article 5 Convention movement who are sincerely doing what they think is the best way to restore the Republic. We're happy they're looking at the Constitution. However, we are deeply concerned about two things. Number one, that the movement will ultimately frustrate and take out the fight of many solid patriots. And two, the convention will not change anything for the better and may very well open up the Constitution for a rewrite. Is it truly worth it? If you like what we do, then be sure to share this video with your family and friends. Until next week, we'll see you then.